As part of the English language major at the University of Quintana Roo, the class Discourse Analysis focuses on developing skills for analysis of oral and written texts that are relevant in the teaching and learning of English as a foreign language. In this video, we will explore classroom discourse and we will present our findings from a classroom observation. This observation was conducted by Diana Yemo, Maribel Mendoza Ontiveros, Uriel Puc Spence, and myself, Heather Johnston Santin. Both study and class were conducted by Dr. Moses Perales, who will define classroom discourse and give examples of key interactions.
This is Moses Perales here. I will talk about the goals of the class. The first goal is to present the results of an oral classroom discourse analysis project of English teachers interactors, which was conducted at UQRoo by pre-service EFL teachers under my guidance as part of my discourse analysis class. They were my students. The second goal is to present the participating pre-service teachers' reflections on what they learned by engaging in this discourse analytic study and how this learning can inform their future teaching. Now, what do we understand by classroom discourse? We understand classroom discourse to mean recurring patterns of social interaction that are manifested in language and other semiotic modes that occur in a classroom. However, while we acknowledge that other semiotic modes exist, like body language and visuals, this presentation focuses on the linguistic mode only. A central tenet we hold with the whole field of classroom discourse analysis is that classroom discourse, if properly managed, can provide many opportunities for interlanguage development, that is, for further learning of English. Now, discourse analysis in general and classroom discourse analysis in particular have enjoyed recognition as part of what language teachers should know for a long time internationally for quite a few years. However, its incorporation to the curriculum of the BA in English at UQRoo is only very recent. It happened in 2015 and it began to take effect in 2017. So it should be no surprise that there are no previous studies of EFL classroom discourse in the context of UQRoo. Another key term here is classroom interactional competence. According to Walsh, this refers to teachers' and learners' ability to use oral classroom interaction as a tool for mediating and assisting learning. And as any other competence, we're not born with it. It has to be developed, and one of the ways to develop them is by teaching this competence. At UQRoo, it hasn't been previously taught because there was no training for teachers on classroom discourse analysis or classroom discourse. Another key concept is interactors. So an interactor is a specific interactional feature of classroom discourse that may help or hinder communication. Some interactors mentioned here at wait time. Wait time refers to the amount of time that a teacher waits after asking a question. That is how long a teacher waits for the student to provide an answer before the teacher providing the answer herself or moving on to something else. Confirmation checks, which are questions that the teacher uses to check that she's understood what the student says. Display questions, which I will define in a minute, and so on. So these are like the different discursive moves that a teacher can perform during a class. Now here are some key interactors. They are key to understand this presentation. For example, teacher questions can be of two kinds. Display questions are questions that the teacher already knows the answer for, whereas true questions are questions that the teacher doesn't know the answer for, meaning the teacher really doesn't know what the student might say. True questions are more conducive to true dialogue. True dialogue are exchanges between teachers and students that involve true questions and their answers. In other words, they're not used. True dialogue does not involve just dialogue for the sake of rehearsing a language feature, but dialogue for the sake of communication. And it's supposed to be more conducive to interlanguage development. Another important interactor is the IRF sequence. IRF means initiation, response, feedback. This is a dialogic sequence that has been investigated a lot in the literature, and it has been shown to be prevalent in classroom discourse around the world. It means that a teacher asks a question, a student answers, and then the teacher gives feedback on the answer, sometimes by praising, sometimes by correcting, sometimes by other means. Here are other key interactors. There is negotiation for meaning. Negotiation for meaning consists of sequences where misunderstandings are repaired by using clarification requests, comprehension checks, and so on. Pushed output refers to learner-produced language that is above the learner's present level, which means that the learner is speaking at using words and structures that are more advanced than the ones they currently know, which helps interlanguage development. Scaffolding is the process whereby teachers help students to produce pushed output. It should not be confused with corrective feedback, because in scaffolding, scaffolding does not involve repairing mistakes. It involves making students' language more advanced or more sophisticated, even in the absence of student mistakes. One way to do that is through reformulations, that is, a type of scaffolding where teachers produce a more sophisticated version of a learner's utterance. There will be an example of this next. This is an example of a scaffolding through a reformulation. So this is a class that is watching a video of a soccer match, and then a player gets injured and he limps out of the field. The teacher asks, "So what's going on?" And then a student answers, "A player is walking with difficulty out of the field because he's injured." So the teacher says, "So he's limping out of the field." Repeat after me, "He's limping out of the field." And the teacher writes limp on the board. The student says he's limping out of the field because he's injured. So what we can see here is the student produced an utterance, an answer. "A player is walking with difficulty out of the field because he's injured." That is grammatically perfect. Semantically, it's fine, but it could be more precise. The student could have used a better verb to convey the more specific kind of walking motion that the player was showing. And so the teacher taught that. She used sort of a recast. In this case, it's called a reformulation to do that. And then she said, "He's limping out of the field." And the student produced, reformulated his utterance with that new verb, limping out, which is more advanced. So that helped to make the students' interlanguage more advanced, and it's pushed up. So these features of these interactors, scaffolding through dialogue, pushed output, are taught to be interactors that contribute more strongly to interlanguage development than others. In the absence of these features, of these interactors, interlanguage development, of course, can happen, but these are, let's say, more conducive to it than other interactors, according to the literature. Now I'm going to explain the methods of the study. The study consisted of recording, transcribing, and analyzing 6 UQRoo lessons taught by 6 different UQRoo teachers. 2 were content course lessons of the BA in English, la licenciatura en lengua inglesa. 2 were English courses of the BA curriculum, and 2 were general English courses. The length of the recordings ranged from 45 to 97 minutes. The lessons were recorded within the span of 2 weeks in the month of February of 2020. The students used their cell phones to record the lessons and their laptops to transcribe them. They analyzed the transcripts by segmenting them in turns and coding them using the list of interactors provided by Walsh 2011 and some from Lemke 1990 under my guidance. And here is what the students found. So the 6 teams of students found that all their 6 lessons showed an extreme underuse or a complete absence of the scaffolding and pushed output. Other features were prevalent, such as extended teacher turns, that is, the teachers talked a lot most of the time. Display questions, that is, questions that the teachers already knew the answer for, and direct repairs, that is, direct error correction. What this suggests is that possibly teachers have not received proper training on how to use classroom discourse features to promote interlanguage development, and this might be due to the fact that such type of training has not been available at UQRoo so far. And now these findings are going to be illustrated by an in-depth analysis of one specific lesson. After that, the participating pre-service teachers will discuss their individual reflections regarding what they learned by conducting the study. Thank you.
Hi, this is Diana, and now I'm going to talk about the context. The class we observed was at the University of Quintana Roo. A friend of ours is enrolled in this course, and she told us that the class is studying English. We sent an email to the teacher asking for her permission to observe the class and attaching the informed consent letter. After receiving her approval, we made an appointment to arrange the time and the day of the class observation. On the day of the recording, she signed the informed consent letter. The class we observed was AFDELI 129, Diseño de Programas de Experiencia Educativa. And the goal of the class was the students discuss and analyze the reading of needs analysis and relate it to their own personal experiences. The material we used were only cell phones, which were a Huawei P20 Lite, a Huawei Y6 2018, and an iPhone 7. 1 hour and 10 minutes was the length of the video recording. For the transcription, we read Walsh transcription system. We divided the video into equal sections, about 20 minutes each, and then all of us transcribed a section using Walsh system. After that, we joined all the sections together and divided it every 5-7 minutes. Finally, we numbered each line. For the analysis, we read Walsh glossary to identify the different interactors, moves, or patterns in the transcript. Then, as a group, we discussed our findings to classify the examples and the interactors we found. Also, we highlighted and underlined the transcript with different colors to provide a key. Finally, we discussed and answered these guiding questions according to what we found in the transcript, and we reached a conclusion. This is the colorful key. There isn't all the interactors, patterns, and repairs that we read in Walsh glossary because not all of them were presented in the observed class. IRF sequence versus true dialogue or cross discussion. IRF sequence was presented 34 times and cross discussion only 2 times, with a duration of 93 and 217 seconds each. Display questions were presented 28 times and referential questions were presented 12 times. On the one hand, the IRF sequence was the most prevalent pattern used in the class, as we can see in these examples. On the other hand, it was not appropriate because the IRF pattern didn't help students to provide more elaborated answers and accomplish the goal. We need to remember that the goal was to discuss and analyze a reading which did seem to require more cross-discussion or true dialogue rather than the IRF pattern. Sometimes the teacher gave feedback which was the same the student have just said, and also she added more examples to be clear. In other words, the teacher didn't give opportunities to let the students do better and more explained answers. As we can see in this example, and there is an IRF pattern, but it isn't appropriate because the teacher said the same the student have just said, even she explained better than the student. And the teacher asked, "What else?" The student answered, "Make a previous interview with the teachers." The teacher said, "Okay, so we can interview to the teacher to know about the students, but that were a kind of all in maybe the context." Well, the teacher could have given opportunities to the students to produce complex answers. The student gave short answers. Instead, the teacher could have let the students talk, analyze, and discourse more deeply by elicitation. As we can see in these examples, the student gave short answers, and the students didn't give more complex and elaborated answers. A cross discussion or a true dialogue would have been better because it would have encouraged students to ask different types of questions which could be referential to let it out to help the students to have a deeper understanding of the reading.
This is Maribel Mendoza here, and I will be talking about teacher F moves, scaffolding, feedback, and meaning negotiation. So what we found is that most of the time, the teacher used the feedback moves to provide the correct answer and to praise students even though their answers weren't very elaborated. In the example we have here, the teacher echoes the student's answer and then praises the student saying, "Okay, very good." We observed that the teacher used feedback moves to encourage negotiation for meaning using clarification requests, like the example highlighted in green. We can see that she didn't understand the student's utterance, so she asked for clarification. To provide the feedback, the teacher mostly used direct repair, comprehension checks, and clarification requests. In the gray highlights, the teacher uses comprehension checks to ensure that the students are understanding what she was saying. She uses words like right and okay. The words in blue are an example of direct repair, where the teacher doesn't give an explanation on the correction she is making. She just gives a correction. The example highlighted in green, clarification request, where the teacher asks the student to clarify what they have said. We found that the teacher rarely used feedback moves to encourage pushed output. The opportunities were scarce. In the example below, the teacher was encouraging the student to say more. She was prompting the student so she could provide the adequate word for what she was trying to say. In this situation, the teacher could have used scaffolding by providing accurate vocabulary, but it wasn't the case. The teacher did, however, give extended wait time, which is highlighted in pink. This extended wait time could have served to give the student the opportunity to contribute with an extended answer. As we can see, however, this was not the case as the sentences are incomplete.
It's surreal here. Now we have the teacher turns and the prevalence of learners' interactors. We found that the next interactors were not present during the class. The first one is through dialogue. If students had expressed through dialogue with regard to what they understood about the content of the reading, it would have been evidence that they comprehended the reading and were able to relate it to their own experiences, thus accomplishing the goal of the class. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Now, by reformulating and providing the students with comprehensible input before the cross discussion activity, perhaps the learners might have been able to understand the terms used in the reading. However, they did not show evidence of understanding some terms such as ongoing and one single episode. Instead, they were asking for clarification. This is evident in the line 331 and again in 371 and 372. So, with a deeper and prior clarification of these terms, they might have initiated through dialogue, sharing their ideas and opinions, rather than asking for explanation about vocabulary. This might have also given the students the opportunity to perform pushed output. In the examples below, the columns highlighted in blue represent teacher talking time. As we can see, the teacher talking time was extremely prevalent during the class, and most of these turns lasted more than 1 minute. This is just an example of one section of the class. However, this was recurring throughout the whole class. We did not consider that the teacher talking time was appropriate for the goal of the class, since even though the teacher gave opportunities to produce output, she provided the full extended answers of the questions after seeing that the learners did not elaborate their answers. As we can see from the line 341 to 346, the teacher was asking questions. Then, in 349, a student gave an incomplete answer. After that, the teacher provided the complete answer to her own question. We can see the same pattern in the next example in the line 384, where the student's answer was not elaborated. So the professor once again provided the full extended answer. Therefore, we believe something the teacher could have done was to encourage the students to say their ideas in Spanish and then help them to encode the same ideas in English. This way, the lack of English language proficiency they might have wouldn't be a problem to share the ideas anymore.
Type of interaction and class goals. While there were many attempts to discuss and analyze the reading related to needs analysis, we consider that the interaction observed in the class did not match the teacher's stated goals of the class as much as we expected. There was very little contribution to the analysis of the reading on the part of the students compared to the contribution of the teacher. This may have been because the teacher failed to promote students' contributions efficiently, because students didn't read the text which was previously assigned to them, because their reading comprehension ability didn't allow them to fully grasp the ideas in the text, or for some other reason that restricted their participation. The teacher could have given more opportunities for students to produce extended answers and pushed output. It would have been favourable for students' language development if the teacher had elicited extended answers rather than repeatedly accepting short answers and expanding on them herself. As we can see from the examples below, most answers from students weren't extensive. Here we can see in line 384, 794 and 807. If the teacher had promoted extended answers, perhaps the student would have expressed more experiences or produced pushed output. This would have helped reach the class goal. The teacher could have let students analyze the text through the use of referential questions. Because there were more than twice as many examples of display questions than there were referential questions, we can say that perhaps it would have been more advantageous for students and their language learning if the teacher had used more referential questions. This would have given the students the opportunity to express their thoughts and experiences more, analysing the text in their own words, thus meeting the class goal. Below are examples of referential questions. Here we can notice that students' answers were much longer when given in response to referential questions than display questions seen in the previous slides. Limitations. Our limitations included having unsuitable equipment. We didn't have enough cameras to record the class from different areas of the classroom. Likewise, the lack of memory storage in our phones. Unfortunately, we did not contemplate that the video recording would use so much memory, so part of the class was not recorded. This unrecorded section was about 2 minutes long. We found incomprehensible students' utterance because our basic recording equipment didn't have high-quality microphones. Our recommendations for future study include distributing the recording devices around the room, making sure all utterances were recorded effectively. Using suitable equipment. Our classroom observation could have been improved if we had professional recording devices. Likewise, using a transcription application. It would have been time efficient to use a transcription application to rule out the tedious work of listening over and over again to the classroom discourse. Our opportunities for further research include observing the same class but with different class objectives in order to identify if the interactors the teacher used are more useful for different aims. Likewise, we would like to observe the same class but with different students so that we can see their influence in the class to accomplish the objectives. As well, we would like to observe the same class but based on language rather than content in order to recognize if the teacher uses other interactors to promote learning and accomplish the objective of the class.
The most complicated part of this experience, I think, was analyzing and identifying the concepts, because some concepts are so similar to others that it's easy to get them confused. Also, I found it fascinating to get to know the different interactions that can happen in a class. I think that before this experience, I wasn't really aware of all these interactions. I believe this experience was enriching, not only because I was able to learn new concepts, but I also learned how to transcribe a video, which can be complicated most of the time.
While transcribing, I realized that you can get confused because of the quality of the audio. And during the analysis of the transcript, I realized that all the interactions can be used with different purposes, and knowing how and when to use them is crucial to accomplish the goal of the class. And lastly, in my opinion, it is crucial to be aware of what interactions we use as teachers during the class and to make sure to encourage students' output.
Transcribing a class proved to be difficult at times because of audio and technical difficulties. Likewise, it was challenging to understand all contributors of the class. While transcribing is a long and tedious job, it did prove to be beneficial to understand how interactors can be used in effective language learning and what results different interactors encourage. By analysing classroom discourse, I have come to understand the importance of teacher contributions and the use of appropriate interactors with regard to different activities. How a teacher expresses themselves is important in promoting student output and accomplishing learning objectives. I would be interested in seeing how classroom discourse is expressed in other classes, in other activities, and from other teachers.
Before this, I didn't notice all the interactors that a teacher uses to make a class better. Also, I think that teachers don't take into account that they are using them. Transcribing and analyzing this class make me to understand better how a teacher can make students think, analyze, discuss, and learn more by the interactors and at the same time accomplish the goal of the class. If teachers can use them correctly, well, the goal of the class could be accomplished. As an English language student, I also think that knowing all this is a benefit for me to be a good teacher and let the students to understand better in different ways. I strongly believe that it depends in many factors to do that, but with practice and more planning, could happen.